You have likely noticed a pattern. The more you explain yourself, the less you are heard. The more you react, the more power you hand over. You have sat across from people who never deserved your reasoning, yet you offered it anyway, hoping that if you just found the right words, they would finally understand. You have replayed conversations in your head, refining arguments for an audience that was never listening in the first place. You have defended your decisions to people who had already decided you were wrong before you opened your mouth. And every time you spoke, you felt yourself shrink while they grew louder. In a world addicted to noise and emotional reactivity, silence has become the rarest and most formidable psychological shield. When you stop defending your choices and master the art of sovereign detachment, a profound shift occurs in the room. This is not about manipulation. This is about Carl Jung's observation on the immense psychological weight of the unbothered mind. Read that line again, because hidden inside it is the exact reason you have felt powerless every time you tried to explain your side of the story. You were taught that if you condemned the behavior loudly enough, if you clarified your position thoroughly enough, if you justified your choices passionately enough, the truth would finally land. It does not. It never has. The world does not reward the most accurate explanation. It rewards the most composed presence. And while you were busy trying to be understood, the people draining you were quietly studying your reactions, learning exactly which words, which tones, which accusations would pull you back into the arena every single time. Your reactivity became their remote control. Your need to be seen as fair, as reasonable as the good one, became the leash they used without ever holding it. This is the unspoken architecture of modern social dynamics. The conditioned mind explains, the sovereign mind observes, and the gap between those two states is the entire difference between a life of quiet exhaustion and a life of quiet command. What you are about to learn is not a technique. It is a restoration. A return to a version of you that existed before the world taught you that your worth depended on how well you could perform your innocence. For people who were never going to believe it anyway, by the end of this, you will understand why Carl Jung dedicated a portion of his life's work to what he called the integration of the colder, more detached aspects of the psyche, and why shadow psychology considers your suppressed capacity for non-reaction one of the most powerful forces you have ever been talked out of. You will see exactly why detachment is not coldness, it is clarity. You will recognize the precise moment in any interaction when silence becomes more devastating than any argument you could construct. And you will walk away with a framework so structurally sound that the next time someone tries to pull you into their chaos, you will feel the strange, almost unfamiliar sensation of your own gravity holding steady. If these ideas resonate with you, hit that subscribe button for more top-tier content. Also, drop a sovereign in the comments so I know you're ready. Let's dive in. Begin here, because this is where every drained, highly aware person loses the game before they even realize they are playing it. You believe that if you can just articulate yourself clearly enough, the other person will adjust their behavior. This belief is the foundation of your exhaustion. It assumes that the conflict you are in is an intellectual one, a matter of information exchange, when in reality, most of the friction in your life is not about misunderstanding at all. It is about positioning. The person provoking you is not waiting for clarity. They are waiting for access. Access to your emotional state, your time, your nervous system, your sense of self. And every word you offer in your own defense is a key you hand them, willingly. Carl Jung understood this dynamic intimately. He observed that the psyche does not respond to logic when it is in a defensive posture. It responds to presence, to weight, to the quiet, unmistakable signal that a person is no longer available for the dance. The more you explain, the more available you appear. The more available you appear, the less your presence weighs. And the less your presence weighs, the more the room belongs to whoever is willing to escalate. This is the explanation trap. It dresses itself up as maturity. It feels like the responsible, communicative, emotionally intelligent thing to do. But strategically, it is the slow surrender of your authority, one paragraph at a time. Consider how often you have walked away from a conversation feeling smaller, even though you said everything you wanted to say. That sensation is not a failure of your words. It is the natural consequence of speaking to someone who was never going to grant you the verdict you were seeking. You were performing a trial in a courtroom that does not exist. And the verdict you wanted, vindication, recognition, an apology, was never on the menu. The first law of inner sovereignty is this: the moment you stop trying to be understood by people committed to misunderstanding you, you reclaim the energy that was funding their power over you. This is not bitterness, this is accounting. And once you start running the numbers honestly, you will see exactly how much of your life has been spent paying interest on a debt you never owed. Now we arrive at the mechanism, because understanding why explanation fails is only half the work. The other half is understanding why silence succeeds, and it succeeds for reasons most people will never grasp in their entire lives. When you go quiet, truly quiet, not the sulking silence of suppressed anger, but the composed silence of a person who has simply decided not to participate, something extraordinary happens in the psychological field around you. The other person begins to encounter themselves. This is the principle of projection, and it is one of the most important contributions Carl Jung made to shadow psychology. People do not actually react to you. They react to the version of you they have constructed inside their own mind, a version assembled from their own unhealed material, their own insecurities, their own unfinished business. When you react, you confirm their projection. You give it shape, voice, oxygen. But when you remain still, the projection has nothing to feed on. It begins to collapse back onto the person who created it. And suddenly, they are no longer arguing with you. They are arguing with themselves while staring at your unmoved face. This is why your composed silence makes certain people visibly uncomfortable. It is not because you are being cruel. It is because your stillness has removed the mirror they were using to avoid themselves. Detachment in this sense is not absence. It is presence without participation. You are fully there, fully aware, fully observing, but you have withdrawn the emotional currency they were depending on to keep the dynamic alive. And here is the part almost no one will tell you. The people who need your reactions the most are the people who have the least to offer you in return. The drama, the provocations, the carefully placed comments designed to make you defend yourself, these are not signs of conflict. They are signs of extraction. Someone has identified that your emotional intelligence, your willingness to engage, your tendency to over-explain are renewable resources, and they have been mining them. Composure ends the operation, not through confrontation, but through unavailability. The strategist understands this instinctively. Machiavelli wrote that the prince who is unreadable cannot be outmaneuvered because predictability is the currency of manipulation. When you become still, you become unreadable, and when you become unreadable, the entire architecture of the dynamic shifts in your favor without you ever raising your voice. Here is where most people flinch. Because to access this level of detachment, you must integrate something you have spent your entire life being told to suppress. Carl Jung called it the shadow, the disowned aspects of the self that the conscious mind has rejected in order to maintain a socially acceptable identity. And for you, specifically, for the highly aware, the conscientious, the one who has always tried to do the right thing, the shadow contains something very particular. It contains your capacity to not care, not in a destructive way, in a sovereign way. The part of you that is fully capable of looking at someone's distress, recognizing it, and choosing not to absorb it. The part of you that can hear a manipulative comment and simply let it pass through the room like weather. The part of you that does not need to fix, soothe, justify, or repair every emotional tremor in your vicinity. You were taught that this part of you is cold, selfish, heartless. You were taught this by people who benefited enormously from your inability to access it. Shadow psychology reveals a different truth. The detached aspect of your psyche is not the absence of compassion. It is compassion that has finally developed boundaries. It is the recognition that constant emotional availability is not a virtue. It is a vulnerability that the unscrupulous have been exploiting for as long as you can remember. When you integrate this shadow, when you finally give yourself permission to be unbothered, something profound stabilizes inside you. The anxious vigilance you have carried for years, the constant scanning of other people's moods, the reflexive apologizing, the over-functioning, the explaining, all of it begins to quiet. Because you are no longer outsourcing your sense of safety to the approval of people who were never going to grant it. This is what Carl Jung meant when he spoke of wholeness. Not the polished, agreeable, endlessly accommodating version of yourself that the world prefers, but the integrated self, the one that contains both warmth and weight, both kindness and refusal, both presence and the absolute, unshakable right to walk away. Emotional intelligence, properly understood, is not the ability to manage other people's feelings. It is the ability to remain anchored in your own center while other people manage theirs. And until you integrate the cold shadow, you will continue to confuse the two and continue to be drained by the confusion. Now we move from understanding to embodiment, because all the theory in the world means nothing if you cannot hold the posture when the moment arrives. And the moment will arrive, probably this week, possibly today. Someone will say something designed to pull you back into the old pattern, a pointed remark, a passive-aggressive question, a subtle accusation wrapped in concern, an invitation to defend yourself dressed up as a conversation. And in that moment, you will feel the old machinery start to engage, the heat in your chest, the rehearsed sentences forming in your mind, the familiar urgency to clarify, to correct, to be seen accurately. This is the threshold. And how you cross it will determine whether you remain a participant in dynamics that drain you, or whether you finally step into the sovereign stance. The practice is deceptively simple and almost impossibly difficult at first. You pause, you breathe, you let the silence sit, you do not fill it, you do not rescue the other person from the discomfort of their own provocation. You allow your stillness to do the work that your words used to do, badly. If you must respond, you respond with brevity so clean it almost feels rude. A simple acknowledgement, a short observation, a neutral statement that closes the loop without opening a new one. You do not explain, you do not justify, you do not apologize for boundaries you have every right to hold. The strategist understands that every additional sentence is a surface for the other person to grip. Composure removes the surfaces. It leaves nothing to hold on to. And here is what you will notice, almost immediately. The people who were drawn to your reactivity will begin to drift away, not because you pushed them, because the dynamic that fed them no longer exists. And the people who were drawn to your essence, your actual presence, will begin to come closer, because for the first time they can see you clearly, unobscured by the constant noise of your self-defense. This is the quiet redistribution that detachment performs in your life. It does not announce itself. It does not require a confrontation. It simply changes the gravitational field around you and watches as the appropriate people arrange themselves accordingly. Inner sovereignty is not built through grand declarations. It is built through 1,000 small moments of chosen stillness, each one a brick in a fortress that no provocation can breach. And finally, we arrive at what this all becomes when practiced consistently, because detachment is not a single act, it is a field, an atmosphere you carry with you into every room. Over time, as you stop participating in the emotional economies that used to consume you, something begins to crystallize around you. People sense it before they can name it. They describe you as composed, as grounded, as difficult to read. They notice that you do not flinch the way you used to, that you do not rush to fill silences, that your responses arrive with a delay that suggests thought rather than reaction. They notice that you no longer seek their approval, and paradoxically, they begin offering it more freely, because nothing makes a person more interesting than their refusal to perform for an audience. This is the untouchable field. It is not arrogance. Arrogance is loud, insecure, performative. The untouchable field is quiet, secure, and entirely indifferent to whether it is recognized. You will find that conflicts that used to consume weeks of your mental energy now resolve themselves, or simply disappear, because you stopped feeding them. You will find that people who used to talk over you now lean in to hear what you have to say, because you say less, and what you say carries more weight. You will find that opportunities, relationships, and possibilities that were always available to you but obscured by the noise of your overfunctioning begin to surface with surprising clarity. Carl Jung wrote that the privilege of a lifetime is to become who you truly are. And who you truly are, underneath the conditioned politeness, underneath the trained accommodation, underneath the decades of explaining yourself to people who were never going to listen, is a person of considerable weight, considerable presence, considerable authority. Shadow psychology calls this individuation. The strategist calls it sovereignty. The result is the same. You become a person whose silence carries more information than most people's speeches. A person whose absence is felt more than most people's presence. A person who has finally understood that composure is not the absence of feeling, it is the mastery of where your feeling is permitted to go. You came into this with a question you may not have known how to ask. Why do you feel so powerless when you try to explain your side of the story? And how do you regain your footing without fighting? The answer is now in your hands. You were not powerless because your words were inadequate. You were powerless because you were playing a game that rewards the opposite of what you were offering. The arena does not reward clarity. It rewards weight. And weight is built through restraint, through the disciplined refusal to spend yourself on audiences that will never appreciate the currency. Detachment is the path. Silence is the instrument. The integration of your cold shadow is the key. And inner sovereignty is the destination, not as a fixed location, but as a way of moving through the world that no provocation can disturb. You do not need to announce any of this. You do not need to inform the people in your life that you have changed. They will notice, they always notice, and the ones who matter will adjust. The ones who do not will not, and both outcomes are exactly what you want. So here is your challenge, and I want you to take it seriously. The next time someone offers you the familiar invitation to defend yourself, decline. Not with words, with stillness. Let the silence say what your explanations never could. Watch what happens in the space you refuse to fill. Watch what happens to the dynamic when you stop being the one who keeps it alive. If you are ready to step into this, if you are committed to becoming the composed, untouchable version of yourself that has been waiting underneath all that reactivity, drop the word untouchable in the comments. Let that word be your private vow to yourself. a signal to you that something has shifted. And if you want more of this, more Carl Jung, more shadow psychology, more of the rarely taught wisdom that separates the reactive from the sovereign, subscribe. This is the only place where the integration of the strategic and the psychological is taken this seriously. Where detachment is not coldness, but clarity. Where silence is not absence, but authority. And whatever you do, don't stop now. The on-screen video matters. More than you think. Trust me, you don't want to miss it. I'll see you there. See what others miss. Know what others fear. Become who others can't.